Oh, let me tell you something. Busting makes me feel good.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Blockbusting, the podcast where we love to hate movies. I'm cracking my knuckles. I don't know why. I'm very excited. Today's guest, the very funny Dave Horwitz.
Hi.
Hi. I'm sorry I introduced you in the middle of drinking a sip of your water.
My fault. You were introducing me and I took a drink. So you're apologetic. I'm apologetic. Time to apologize for the sins of a movie.
Yes, specifically the sins of Last Night in Soho. Edgar Wright's entry. Well, he made 2 movies last year.
He did.
The Sparks Brothers, which I didn't see.
I thought it was great.
I love a documentary, and I love an Edgar Wright.
The Sparks Brothers is such a weird. It's not that. It's so in tune with my quarantine viewing habits because I just was digesting music and YouTube videos, and sometimes I would leave on like 3-hour Grateful Dead live concerts for my dog while I left because I was like, just something low in the background that's like kind of noodly that she can listen to and fall asleep to. And I like this band. I want to see if they have 18 music videos. And the Sparks Brothers is just like, it is talking head interviews about every single one of their 40 albums, and it's like 2.5 hours. It's kind of flashy, but it literally is just like watching a VH1 show.
There you go.
For like, almost 3 hours, and it's great.
I did my quarantine viewing habits. I watched a lot of movies, TV shows, stuff I had never caught up on, stuff my girlfriend had never seen that I was like, oh great, we can finally watch Breaking Bad from the start. You will get it. But also, in my solo time, I would put on a lot of YouTube videos of like people at casinos, like live playing like craps or blackjack, because then you get to hear people.
Casino noise?
Yeah. Casino noise is kind of soothing.
Would you be focusing on it, or was it background music, or?
It depended.
Would you ever just sit down and like you were just standing over someone's shoulder at a casino and just watch the whole thing?
I have a couple times. There's some where it's like, if it's somebody who goes on like an incredible run of winning a bunch, then it's like, oh, cool, nice. I'm very happy for this person.
Of course this exists because there's literally videos of people beating claw machines on YouTube that are which is just casinos for kids. But I love gambling movies. It's kind of sometimes more fun to watch somebody lose and then win and then lose, but if someone's going on a run and there's a video of it that you can just watch for 40 minutes. I've already watched California Split, Mississippi Grind, both versions of The Gambler, James Caan and Mark Wahlberg, Rounders, which is not a good movie, and yet I will come back to it every time. Any movie with poker in it, Molly's Game, really rough movie, but a lot of poker in it. If I can just distill it down, how long are these videos?
Some of them are an hour. Some of them are 2 hours. It just kind of depends.
I'm going to put this on in the background next time I write, because sometimes I write on my bed and my TV's mounted to the wall. I can just put it on YouTube.
That's what I would do. Is I would put it on. It was great writing background noise, and then eventually you tune in. You're like, oh, nice.
Oh, this guy's on a hot streak.
You
close your laptop.
He rolled 40 times and he still hasn't hit a 7. Incredible. I can't be mad at that.
Believable. Of course. It's like all the best parts of these movies. California Split's great for other reasons than just them playing craps, but all right. I know what I'm doing when I go home.
You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
What definitely you shouldn't do is watch Last Night in Soho, which you watched for the very first time pretty recently, as did I.
Yeah.
And yikes.
It's straight up stinks. When you very kindly asked me to do this, we talked about possibly a different movie, and it's like, I think I might have said this in my initial message. Like, I'm such a movie dork. Like, I write TV, but I've just started like working in features and stuff. Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it. I did this thing on Letterboxd where I watched 70 movies from the 70s, and like that was my big quarantine project because I was just like, oh, it's the greatest decade that's ever happened in cinema. And so I got to 70 and then I just kept going and like I couldn't stop. And so it's obviously more fun to like something, but when you're kind of gritting your teeth and going like, I cannot believe this is happening. Like this is one of those movies where I was like, it can't get sillier. And then it just got sillier.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, the twist isn't going to be this obvious. And then it was. And it's like, this character can't possibly just be here for this purpose. And they were like every single thing. And so I was like, okay, I can talk about this for hours.
There were a lot of moments when I was watching it where I was like, there's no way that this is going to be like, in my mind, I was like, that's my first thought. Then there's definitely something crazier and different that's going to happen. But it felt like this was a series of, in the screenwriting process, the first idea that came to mind, great, we're going to go with that. We're going to put that down and sling it into the hands of our actors.
Well, when there's a couple characters that don't seem even possible that they could be real or they could exist for their primary function. So when there's like a sweet best friend to boyfriend pipeline character who's like, are you okay? Like, I think we should take a walk. And you're like, well, this guy's going to turn out to be a creep. And it's like, nope, he's just there to support her and think she's great. And that's it.
Right. Well, especially when the theme of the movie is so early on.
Don't trust blokes.
You can't trust a bloke. You can't trust a man. Not when they're driving you in a cab. Not when they're standing outside your dorm.
Nasty things go down in Soho every night. Not just in 2020, but also in 1969, love. Even if the dresses are pretty, there's some dark stuff underneath.
Oh, man. So, this movie, I remember the trailers came out for it. And do you like, I'm an Edgar Wright fan. I'm a big fan of Hot Fuzz is one of my all-time top 20 favorite movies. I love Scott Pilgrim. I enjoyed The World's End. I enjoyed Shaun of the Dead. I know a lot of people love Shaun of the Dead. I'm just like, that's a fine movie.
Shaun of the Dead is, I think, perfect. Scott Pilgrim is the best. I'm the perfect age to have because I read the comic books. It was. I thought Scott Pilgrim was fantastic, and then it like made $4, and they were like, you can't make a movie for a hot second. He's like, oh man, I like Hot Fuzz a bunch. But I have such a weird, maybe it's the Britishness of it, but I think Hot Fuzz is so British that it slightly detracts from like the fun and games because, and I rewatched it recently because my friend was like, you're wrong. It's the greatest movie. And then we watched it together and like halfway through he goes, oh, I kind of see what you're saying. Like when the actual crimes start happening, it becomes less of like a police procedural and more of just like this is a proper, just the kind of the properness of the and how it's like what the actual thing is people aren't upkeeping the ideals of the town of like
the village is not kept clean enough.
Exactly.
That kind of thing,
which is like very valid, but I think it maybe is just so British that it's not that it goes over my head, but it diminishes a little bit from the fun and games of like we're unlikely cops doing crazy cop stuff.
Right.
We love bad boys, but we're not bad boys.
Right.
But yeah, Hot Fuzz. I mean, I almost said Sean Pilgrim. Shaun of the Dead.
Sean Pilgrim versus the Globe. Another great Edgar Wright.
The end of the world. But Scott Pilgrim and Shaun of the Dead are two all-time faves. And so I'm always excited for a movie of his. But lately, I really did not enjoy Baby Driver. But the trailer for this came out and it's a good trailer.
It's a good trailer.
But there's also no dialogue in the trailer. It's
that's true. It's just the music. And there's a lot of screaming and twirling around in dresses.
Screaming, twirling, 60s era British music, beautiful women, dashing men, crazy visuals, neon lights. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fucking in. Sure.
Seems cool.
This is everything I want in a movie.
Sure.
But can maybe be wary of the trailer with no dialogue because maybe the dialogue is really bad.
Perhaps. In this case, it is. And that's, there's so much about this movie that I really wanted to like watching it. I love the actors in it. I'm a big fan of Thomas Mackenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy, Diana Rigg, Matt Smith. They're all like fine actors. They've done some great solid work over the years.
Sure.
And obviously Edgar Wright, fan of his work.
And visually, he knows where to put a camera.
Yeah.
He's like, you're looking for his tricks. Anytime one of his tricks happened, I was like, ooh, you know?
I get it. Yeah. It's like when they say the title of the movie in the movie. That's how it feels watching an Edgar Wright spin move or something like that.
Well, yes. But then when it's like, oh, we're really doing a lot of mirror stuff here. Okay. Like, how much more mirror stuff are we going to do? Turns out it's half the movie.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, maybe that's not such a fun. That becomes a little bit, it's diminishing returns, honestly. But like all of the visual trickery of Scott Pilgrim exists because it's like, this is a video game.
Right.
And that works. And that's one of the first times you saw that in an actual movie. And I think it is genuinely perfect. Hot Fuzz, it's like, we're making Bad Boys, but we're in rural England.
Right.
Perfect. Shaun of the Dead, it's like, it's a zombie movie, but it's a comedy. And it was the first time that had ever been done. This one was just like, it's the 60s. Like,
we're here.
We're in London. This girl thinks the past is good, but what if it wasn't all it was cracked up to be, love?
Guess what, love? It's bad. I like to know where all the pretty blonde girls are so I can disappoint them with how their visions of the past really are.
I mean, but see, that's what I think is the weirdest thing about the movie. It's like, hey, the past isn't all it's cracked up to be. But then, it's Thomas and Mackenzie.
Thomas and Mackenzie, right. Yeah.
She plays an aspiring fashion designer, a fashion student. All of her designs are not just like 60s inspired. They are just 60s dresses. So the end of the movie is like, spoiler alert. If the thing you're really worried about is her fashion career, skip ahead now. But the end of the movie is like this fashion show where these people, the girls walk in the show and her designs are just like 60s dresses. They're not updated.
Right.
She just did a 60s thing and everyone's like, and her teacher, who the entire time, again, you think is maybe going to be, there might be a twist on her, is like, you're the most talented girl in the class. Like, it's only praise, it's only effusive. Like the only notes that come are like her mean classmates who only exist to be mean.
Jocasta, who I hated as a character, and I'm like, well, you did the right thing by making a character who we hate, but also this is all she's going to be.
Why?
That's it.
The bullying thing. It's like, it's not even snipey or backhanded for a reason. It's just like these people are mean to her because they're like, oh, she's from the country, and it's like, she's beautiful and talented. Like, shut up. It's so weird. But yeah, it's obsessed with the 60s. The message seems to be like, it's not all it's cracked up to be, but it's top to bottom just amazing 60s music, top to bottom 60s fashion. And so it's kind of like men are bad, but then it's also like, but then women are like, it is
exactly.
The message is so muddled. It makes genuinely, it ended and I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to think except for like, hey, aren't these deep cut like R&B songs good? And it's like, yeah, of course they are.
Right.
Of course they're great.
Of course they are.
He's got great taste in music. It's like you walk away going like, well, Anya Taylor-Joy's stunning.
Yeah.
And this music's good. And it's bad when sex workers are mistreated. But are we also supposed to think sex work is bad by virtue of what it is? I don't know what it's trying to say.
Yeah, because that's really, I said to myself, and I wrote it down in my notes too, which is at the very end, like, so the whole premise of the movie is we go back in time in her dreams. Thomas Mackenzie is like, got some supernatural thing going on or some potential like a mental illness thing that's hinted at, like schizophrenia or something like that, where she sees her mom and then she has these dreams, but they're not really dreams, or she's going back in time.
Exactly.
And
the elevator pitch is like, what if a girl was weird, but pretty and smart and like the 60s? And because of all of those things, she goes there to the 60s. But also maybe she really is going, but maybe she's not. And who is this? Like, I think for 5 minutes, you're supposed to be like, is it her? Is it like a version of her?
I thought that's what the trailer was like, was making it seem like that was what was going to happen.
Yeah, but then as soon as she rents a room from an old British woman who's like, oh, I used to have a lot of times. And like, I think the second that she's like, yeah, rent my room, it's the same as it ever was. I'm like, okay.
I was like, it's good. There's no way it's good. They're going to do this.
I think I have a feeling about what might be. But then it's like, it couldn't possibly be this.
Right.
It's so obvious. And then it is. I'm always 9 steps behind every movie. I'm obsessed with movies. I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I'm a huge dork, and I the twist is always like just eludes me. And this is one of the first movies where I'm like, I'm smart, which is not a good review of a movie. It's like it made me kind of an idiot feel smart because the whole time I was like, there's no fucking way that this is actually what they're doing,
right? Because as we go along, we find out that the dream that Anya Taylor-Joy's character was supposed to have is actually a lie, and she is getting pimped out, and Thomas Mackenzie's like trying to solve a murder because she sees her get murdered while she's like trying to hook up with the nice sweet boy, but it gets really like even more convoluted from there.
Slight detour. So I thought,
away.
so one of the many times I thought that the movie was going to like do something, because the whole something surprising or something intentional or whatever. So this, do you remember the name of the boyfriend's?
I don't.
Okay. So again,
it's like a very Mark or something.
It's a very thankless role. He's just very intensely sweet to her the entire time. It almost gets him killed. Amazingly, no one is even really harmed by the end, which is insane. They're all just like walking and talking and hanging out.
He's in a sling. That's about it. That's the worst we see of him being any kind of injured.
He's in an arm sling, but like I think he gets stabbed and like whatever. It doesn't matter.
He gets stabbed in the chest.
Yeah, he gets stabbed in the chest.
He probably inhales a bunch of smoke because they're in a fire.
It's look, okay. So when he goes over there to her rented room in this witchy, spooky place where she's having all these visions, this is it's I think important to mention that this is a like young college aged white British girl, and the guy the guy she's trying to date is a black man.
Yes,
they have some sort of, they're trying to make out. They're making out in the rain. They go back to her place. She has these visions where she basically has to like push him off of her.
Right.
She gets really upset. She's screaming. He looks really freaked out. The Diana Rigg, the woman who's renting her the room, is like, "Let me in. I told you, like, no boys.
No boys after 8.
And I'm immediately in that moment thinking like, oh, like my radar is up for just what time we live in. I'm like, there is, and also just having seen movies that actually go here, where I'm like, okay, there's a young black man who is in a room with a white girl. She's screaming. There's like an old white lady on the other side of the door. Like this guy, something horrible is going to happen.
That's
to this
exactly
guy.
what I thought.
And you know what? Nothing happens.
He walks out. The worst that happens is he steps on glass from the mirror that he accidentally broke.
But then I'm like, they're going to stop. Someone's going to stop him. He's going to be covered in blood. Like this guy's going to jail, and it's going to be or worse. No, like but the fact that the movie is so unconcerned with that stuff is, I think, what was really shocking to me. Where like it takes these weird turns where there's like a slight half a comment on mental illness. Mm-hmm. It's never really talked about, except for her. The weirdest part of that whole thing is that her roommates are like, "Oh, she's mental, love." Like I'm like, no, college students now have a heightened sensitivity about that stuff. Younger people that I talk to are sensitive about this stuff. And so you have these 3 stock mean characters who are like, "Oh, roommate's a bit of a tosser." And you're like, why would you be mean to her? She's having a terrible, like when she
might kill herself just like her mom did.
Yes.
Nobody ever in the world would say anything like that.
No human
college.
being. Yes, exactly. That drove me up a wall. I couldn't believe that they were handling A, mental illness, B, possible suicide, C, just like new. It showed. I mean, he's like almost 50, or he is early 50s. Yes. I don't know how old his co-writer was, but I was like, this just doesn't. I mean,
Christy Wilson Cairns. I'm gonna look up and see how old she is.
Let's see.
Because I feel like this is an excellent point too, and this just occurred to me as you were talking about this. I think part of the big problem with this movie is a problem I have with stand-up sometimes all comedy, but in particular stand-up, which is when somebody in lieu of saying an actual joke will just say a buzzwordy kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that gets a laugh. And it's such the lowest common denominator of like, oh, I recognize what that thing is. I will laugh at this thing now because you said something, I know what it is. And it feels like this is hitting that with like, oh, we're touching on mental illness. We're touching on maybe race relations. We're touching on like male and female relations. We're touching on maybe some Me Too-y kind of stuff. And it feels like instead of actually choosing a thing or two out of those topics to focus on and turn the narrative arc towards that direction, it just leaves a whole bunch of stuff on the table flying around. We're like, well, what are we supposed to pick up here?
Yeah. And it's a highly it's such a highly visual film that I wonder if they were just so much more concerned with, because I don't think it actually looks that great in terms of how it's actually shot, but this like the set design, like the ballroom, like the club that Anya Taylor-Joy is in, where she's like meeting all these people before you learn that before you learn that Matt Smith is, you think he's going to make her a star, but he's actually pimping her out.
He's actually going to pimp her out.
No. But when they're like on the dance floor, it is like a gorgeous, I don't know if it's a set, but it is like, it's unreal. Mm-hmm. And I realized like, he just knows his way around a set piece so well that I was kind of waiting for a big, is there going to be a chase through the streets of London? It all feels kind of like she bartends in a basement bar and it's like kind of dingy, and the room she's rents is kind of cool looking. But by the time there's like a bunch of zombie Johns at the end, I was like, this looks like the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland. Like the way the ghosts look is the way where when you're sitting, I haven't been to Disneyland in like 10 years, so I don't know if it still looks like this, but in the Haunted Mansion, when there's a little ghost man behind you and you see it in the mirror, it's like, that's what this movie looks like.
They look like they're going to ride home with you, and you're going to maybe at best scare a child because you're like, oh no, the ghosts are going to follow you home. These ghosts they look like the putty people from Power Rangers.
Oh my God, they do. they look like Haunted Mansion putties.
Yeah.
That's messed up.
And that's for a movie that, again, this is the downside to trailers, is they're supposed to be cool. And for all the promise of, you see a bunch of hands reach through the floor in a trailer. Yeah, that seems like it's going to be a scary sequence. For the actual way that pans out to be just a bunch of literal faceless Johns who maybe have a mustache amidst their putty face.
Which, not a crime to have a mustache.
Not a crime to have a mustache at all. But in this movie, that's the defining feature we get.
Yeah,
that's all they're allowed to have.
They're allowed to have a mustache. They're allowed to be like, what's your name? And then she says a fake name, and they go, that's a beautiful name.
Yep.
And you're supposed to be like, ugh, all men are the same. And it's like, I don't know. What are you supposed to say to...
What are you supposed to say to somebody who you're just trying to pay to have sex with?
And then...
I don't know.
And then they also exist to like sloppily button up like gray slacks.
Yeah.
And fasten it with a belt and walk away. I mean, it's like that. It's criminalizing sex work, but also at the end, you're supposed to feel bad for it's like, I guess at the end I was like, did they deserve to die?
Because
maybe not, but
they're making it be bad to engage in sex work, while also saying, well, she shouldn't have been. She shouldn't have killed them, but she shouldn't have killed them either.
It's like, you're damned if you don't. You're damned if you do. You're damned if you do anything. And so it's like, I genuinely just lost the thread completely. Where it's like, I mean, we've done I don't know. I'm not sure if on your other episodes you walk through the plot, but it's like, Reader's Digest version. It's like, modern day woman from a small town goes to London. She romanticizes Soho. It's in her dreams. She thinks it'd be so beautiful and glamorous. She's one of these born in the wrong era people. It's like the dark side of thinking you were born in the wrong era. And it's like, to me, that is a fascinating nugget of an idea. To me, I just watched genuinely 40 LA in the 70s movies. My favorite movie of all time is The Long Goodbye, Altman's movie with Elliot Gould, set literally right here. To be able to like watch the movie and go like, oh my God, they just drove by my street. Like, I do it all the time. Like, oh man, I wish that place was open. Like, I really did. I liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood kind of a lot. But I know, and so I'm always like, man, and also I'm just like, I'm like a graying, like Jewish, like I would have cleaned up in 1974.
Sure.
Obviously, so much was terrible back then.
Of course.
So, especially post Vietnam, like it was a nightmare. And I catch myself constantly having these romanticized thoughts. It would be amazing to reckon with those in real time or in a piece of art. This movie really bungles the chance to do that, to be like, things were really not great back then. It's like, okay, how are they not great? And the only way they choose to talk about it is like, well, this one girl who didn't even exist in real life had a bad time because she wanted to be a singer and a guy took advantage of her, which is horrible. But it's this weird straw man thing of like, why don't you tell a real story? Like, talk about something. So at least take a stab at going, here's a real thing that was like in the news in 1969. It just doesn't. Anyway, yeah, she has these visions when she moves out of her abusive roommate's dorm.
Right.
Of a girl who's her own age, but 50 years ago.
Right.
She's having a horrible time in Soho the way she's having a horrible time in Soho. And so they feel like they're connected, but they're not. And then when it gets to like, oh my God, she was murdered. She's having a vision that she was murdered. And then she's like, I have to find out what happened. And then you find out she wasn't murdered. She was the one who murdered. And so she murdered
a bunch of faceless Johns and buried them in the walls of the house. And which also doesn't like, how did that happen? How does it not smell like corpses?
It doesn't make
any sense.
But it's so unconcerned with it. I feel like it really does think that it's aesthetically cool enough to just get away with not saying really anything.
Yes, 100%.
And I think that's a huge bummer because I would have rather. I like kind of duller movies. I would have watched a intense reckoning with something that was going on at the time in late 60s Soho. I went to Soho a couple years ago. It was I loved it. And also I May Destroy You on HBO is set in Soho.
I've heard great things. I still haven't seen it.
You want to talk about A, something that's set in Soho, B, something that features a young woman, C, reckons with sexual assault in a way that like is uncomfortable but is the most realistic and actually deals with like a woman's actual perspective on it. And again, all actually does take place in Soho. It's like, dude, this was being made like before you even made your move. Like, I'm not saying he owes a debt to that show. I'm just saying there exists a piece of art about a woman being conflicted about life and men and it's in Soho. It's such a bonkers thing to get to the end of the movie and go, she's trying to solve the murder of this woman who was treated so horribly. But then she finds out the woman is actually the bad woman.
And she also is the one who's renting the apartment.
Yeah. But it's like, she was the victim. It's like, it's so cloudy by the end.
Yeah.
You don't know who you're like, honestly,
literally and figuratively, because there's also a house fire that happens at this point.
I mean,
in one of the worst, out of a movie that had a bunch of really gorgeous VFX and
bad CGI fire,
the worst CGI fire I think I've ever seen in a movie.
Yeah,
a sequence that totally took me out of the whole rest of the movie visually.
Yeah,
it's like, what happened?
What happened? We don't know. Also, the woman who rents the room, who sets the fire, who's like, I'm going to poison. We get to the end. Poor Thomas and Mackenzie, who just wanted to design some pretty dresses.
Just wanted to design dresses. She had promise. She had a newspaper dress.
Do you understand? You know who the real villains of the movie are her fucking roommates. Because she would have never gone and rented a flat for no money, which makes no sense.
Yeah.
She would have never left her expensive dorm if those girls hadn't been like so unnecessarily cruel.
If Jocasta had been just a little bit nicer and not a caricature of a mean person,
maybe she'll kill herself like her mom did. That's a movie. That's a line in a movie that came out last year.
Yeah.
It's not
insane.
Like it's insane. It's insane. It's I think maybe second only to the bullies in Donnie Darko, which I think about that so much. The weirdest, meanest,
so mean for no reason.
And the bullies in It.
I've never seen it still, but I can imagine
murderous bullies.
if they're on the same level as somebody yelling "Go back to China, bitch" before a hard scene cut. I can only imagine.
Believable. Also, the girl who is I think her character name is Charita in Donnie Darko. She is the woman who has the baby who works at the hotel in the White Lotus.
Oh yeah,
I just found that out.
Makes sense.
But yeah, it makes a lot more sense than what happens at the end of this movie. It would be one thing if the whole time you were like in it and having fun and excited and engaged and wondering what's going on. I mean, I was pretty checked out like 20 minutes in, but I did want to know what was gonna happen.
So
ultimately.
did I, yeah.
But I don't think it's really technically a twist that the woman that you think gets murdered is the one murdering people.
It's not. It's something that it's so telegraphed.
I've been thinking about it.
It's
for
not a
2
twist.
months.
It's not a twist.
It's like if it was a twist, it would have to say something about what it's saying. So
Yeah.
it's not really saying like, it's not going like, see, women are bad too. It's like, see, everyone has to have consequences.
Right.
And you're like, really?
And especially for like, so Christy Wilson Cairns, we figured out she's 34 years old. So that she's not of an age where making a movie and having the decisions that happen in this movie, it's not out of the bounds, or not out of the realm of possibility, rather, for her to be on the page that we're on, which is like, why would you make your characters like this in a movie that is coming out now? Yeah.
I mean, I'm a little older than her, and I still would never, I mean, and it's, you know what, it's possible. Like, I don't know what specific references he was pulling from. I know like he was influenced by some Giallo stuff, like Argento, and like, those are not subtle movies. You know, I've seen some of them, they're bonkers, but I think you get a little extra skosh of leeway for not having them be in English and also for having them be 50 plus years ago.
Right.
Like, I just saw Tenebrae. It's amazing. It's a crazy, crazy movie, but also not a ton of nuance. There's this scene where like, I don't know how they do it, but a dog like jumps a 20-foot fence, and it's like, there's nothing that silly in Last Night in Soho.
No.
If they were really taking stabs, like really taking crazy chances, I'd be like, wow, whatever. You can say whatever you want. Like, it's not about making a point or subtlety or anything, but the fact that they do want you to reckon with bad men, women put in impossible situations, like pushed against the wall. Like, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you survive? They're just not, these two writers are not the people to be handling these issues. Like, I want Scott Pilgrim, Edgar Wright. I want Sean, like, I want You've Got Red on You. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a perfectly executed little joke. I want the suiting up scene from every action movie, but it's like, we're tying our shoes and straightening our tie. Like, it's so clever. You know, that might be what it is. I never really thought about this. He's really super clever.
He's a clever guy.
That is not a clever movie.
No.
We did not just watch a clever movie.
I think, maybe
that movie is a blunt instrument.
It is very blunt. I mean, the way you're talking about Giallo too, and I haven't seen a lot of, I don't know, actually, now that I think about it, I don't think I've seen any of the, you know, the films of that era, but I have seen, what came to mind, the new Suspiria from a couple years back. That movie, it's good. I loved it, but it's so unsubtle. It's so bonkers. It's so over the top to the point where do you mind if I spoil a portion?
No, go for it. I haven't seen it. I saw the original.
There's a literal part. I don't know if this happens in the original Suspiria, but there's a part where as this devil summoning happens and there's this like seance with all the witches at the dance school, they get touched by a demon and all of their bodies start exploding. And it's filmed in this sort of like slow-mo-y kind of way where it's also like slow-mo but also motion blurred, and it's really jarring, but it's so, I remember sitting in the theater and just my jaw was dropped for the entirety of the sequence. And I'm like, this is the only way a movie like this could end.
Yeah. I
love that.
There's and you know, the original was 80, 77 or something. But that like that would have been a practical effect. They would have, painted a watermelon to look like a person's face and then put a bottle rocket inside. Like, it's so, I love that stuff. And the fact that they were being a little bit cheeky weaky in this one is, I think, was its ultimate downfall. Cause you can't really have your cake and eat it too and be like, we're going to make a modern giallo, but also harken back to the past, but also talk about modern issues and also say something about what it is to be hey, things aren't even that different now. Think about that. And it's like, I don't even really, it said nothing by saying everything.
Right. It tried to take on too much and tried to be clever about how much it was doing and ultimately fell flat on its face, which is a real shame.
Yeah.
Because I think there are ways and there are directors and writers who could tell this story so much better.
Yeah.
And so much more effectively and allow it to be as blunt and over the top as a Suspiria.
It's also just a bummer when something kind of stinks. Mm-hmm. He's so talented. Edgar Wright is really good. His hit to miss ratio is like, I mean, he's at least at 500.
It's pretty good.
So it stands to reason that also, I mean, it's just hard to think about anything without thinking about it through the lens of money anymore.
Right.
Where I just watch it and go, oh man, you just like threw $40 million into the trash. Mm-hmm. When you make something expensive that nobody likes, that has no legacy, that's just like, I don't know, I guess. And although I will say, I some people do like it. I was noticing on Letterboxd that like some younger people seem to like it more.
Yeah, it's got a couple good reviews, and I mean, it did decently on Rotten Tomatoes. It got a 75%, right? It got
really,
yeah, on Rotten Tomatoes.
The critic score,
yeah. We got some good reviews. Linda Merrick of the Jewish Chronicle, a thrilling, gorgeously acted offering from a filmmaker who is at the top of his craft and knows exactly what he wants from his performers.
Linda, come on, girl.
David Sims of The Atlantic. Wright remains exceptionally gifted at mashing up genres to create moments of real cinematic lightning. But by and large, this is the bad part. But still, like he gets his right point. By and large, Last Night in Soho is all flash, no impact.
Yeah. See, you gotta have a little nice thing up top if you're. I have a feeling. I think that's not a positive review.
That's definitely not a positive review. There's a lot of Joe Morgenstern loved it. Loved the cinematography. Zan Brooks of The Guardian gave it 4 out of 5 stars. But even this, this is the pull quote on Wikipedia for a 4 out of 5 star review.
Okay.
A gaudy time travel romp that whisks its modern day heroine to a bygone London that probably never existed outside our fevered cultural imagination. And it is thoroughly silly and stupidly enjoyable.
Thoroughly silly? It's not silly.
It's not silly.
It's trying to be, I think he would be upset if he thought somebody thought he made a silly movie out of this.
4-star review, by the way.
Nothing makes sense.
Here's what I'll say to wrap things up. I never talk about books on this podcast, and there actually is a book that I think touches on these issues. Maybe not all of them, because that's the other problem. Obviously, it's trying to tackle too much. There's a book that came out a little while ago called Hot Stew by Fiona Mosley. It's a British author writing about modern day Soho, and it's got a couple different characters, but a lot of it is set around a brothel that the lease is up, and so all of the women who work there are trying to figure out what to do next.
Okay.
There is it's really funny. It's really like Altman-esque in its scope of like the amount of characters and the threads that come together. And it has some really big cinematic climactic moments. And I think that is a kind of story that Edgar Wright perhaps would have been better at directing, because it does address some of the stuff about like bad men, sexual politics, sex worker, deserving rights and fair labor and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't overwhelm you. It focuses on the issues without getting too sidetracked and wanting to pull in other threads. And also, it's cheeky and it's funny and it's clever in a way that this isn't.
It's funny that you're like, maybe this would have been better for him. And I'm glad that you got to cheeky, because I was like, hearing you talk about sexual politics and that it seems like there's a bunch of women, and I was like, I don't know if I trust him to do this. But then you said it was cheeky and clever. And I'm like, okay, yeah, give me that. This, you know what? Maybe it's just that it's so, because I was expecting Baby Driver to be more fun, and that took itself very seriously.
Yeah,
all the John Hamm swoopy hair villain stuff. I was like, is anyone going to smile in this movie at all? And they kind of don't really. But at least it was like the music aspect was a little fun. This one was just dead set on being droll and very serious, and no one even makes a joke. Like Terrence Stamp, I was like, oh man, love this guy. What's he got up his sleeve? And he's just like a wise old. I mean, I guess it's kind of funny that he is about to help her and then gets hit by a car
and dies.
But I feel like that would be a joke in like Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah.
I mean, it honestly is just
that would totally be a joke.
You want to talk about mirror images? That's the mirror image of a funny joke.
Yeah.
When he's like, "I'll help you, love," and then he just backs out. Anytime a character walks backwards into the street talking to someone who's on the sidewalk, they're dying.
Yeah.
Anytime. I've seen it so many times.
It literally almost happens a couple of times prior in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe this is the third time. Maybe it's rule of threes. Maybe it is supposed to be a joke. Who knows?
Yeah. I will say my MVP for the movie is the cabbie, just kicking things off. She's about to have her first great experience, and the first person she talks to is a disgusting pervert.
Right.
Love him.
Love a guy who's like, you got nice legs to be a model. Great thing to really ruin a young woman's experience into a city. Great way to get us into this movie and be like, this is going to leave a bad taste in my mouth, isn't it?
Thanks, man. We're good.
Dave, where can the listeners find you if they want to give you props for what you've said here today or disagree? I don't know, whatever.
You can catch me on Twitter, Dave_Horwitz. That's Horwitz with 1 O. And you can follow me on TikTok. My name is Incredibly Normal Guy. Yeah.
That's a good name. You can.
I'm very normal.
Also, you should follow, if you have a Letterboxd account, you should follow Dave on Letterboxd. Dave's Letterboxd is a delight and very thoughtful. And you're one of the accounts I appreciate the most on there.
Oh, thank you. Everybody can read my review of Batman, and we can get into it.
Oh boy.
Sorry, The Batman.
The Batman. You can find me at Diet J on Twitter and Instagram. You can find Blockbusting on all of your social platforms at Blockbusting Pod, and please subscribe to the Patreon if you like the show. You get bonus episodes, you get access to all my movies and TV shows and all that stuff that I got on my Plex server. Fun times. And that's it. Dave, thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. This has been Blockbusting. Go see something good for a change.